The claim I'm responding to is as follows. The benefit of nuclear energy for America greatly outweighs the risk. My counterclaim is an increase in nuclear power for energy production would have little effect to climate change, with the risk of unacceptable dangers such as accidents and dangers associated with radioactive waste disposal. My opponent's secondary claims are: 1, nuclear energy facilities in the U.S. have high safety standards and account for various natural disasters, human errors, accidents, and deliberate attacks. 2, nuclear energy is the most effective alternative to fossil fuel. And 3, waste from nuclear energy is currently the only real problem with this form of power, but it should not stop us from using the power. In response to his claims, to his first claim, I'm not denying that nuclear energy facilities in the U.S. have high safety standards. However, this does not diminish the dangers of producing and containing nuclear energy. Although it is true that nuclear regulatory commissions has regulations regarding high safety standards and procedures that nuclear power plants must follow in the United States, it does not mean that it is 100% accidents. That 100% of accidents can be avoided. According to the Union of Concerned Scientists, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, or NRC, is not enforcing the safety standards at nuclear power plants, and some nuclear power plants have safety issues that are a cause of concern. In the NRC and Nuclear Power Plant Safety 2011 Executive Summary Report, there were 14 nuclear near misses in 2010 and 15 in 2011 in the United States alone. According to the report, one example exists in Indian Point where the NRC discovered that the liner of refueling cavity at Unit 2 has been leaking since 1993. By allowing this reactor to continue operating with equipment that cannot perform its only safety function, the NRC is putting people living around Indian Point at an elevated undue risk. Secondly, I would argue that nuclear energy is not the most effective alternative to fossil fuel. In fact, when compared to nuclear energy, renewable energy sources such as wind and solar are not only just as effective, but clean and safe. According to altenergy.org, existing power plants worldwide require 75,000 tons of uranium a year to produce roughly around 17% of the total world power. This resource will only be sufficient to meet the demands for the next 42 years. Mark Z. Jacobson, a professor of civil and environmental engineering at Stanford, states that nuclear power emits 25 times more carbon and air pollution than wind energy. He argues that wind energy is by far the most promising, with concentrated solar falling second. Allenergy.org also commented that from an environmental perspective, solar is the best thing going for us. There's no acid rain, no urban smog, no pollution of any kind. It can be used for heating, lighting, and cooling homes, generating electricity, water heating, and a variety of industrial processes. And finally, the advocate claims that the waste of nuclear energy should not stop us from using this form of power. However, even those who are supporters of nuclear power admit that there is no safe method to deal with highly dangerous waste. Uranium must be mined to fuel the nuclear power plants. The process of mining uranium releases radiation in the environment. And according to altenergy.org, this greatly increases the rates of cancer among miners. In a study published in 1980, the British Columbia Medical Association published a report stating that they believe that ever-increasing incidences of lung cancer among Canadian miners would be resulting of continued mining of uranium in Canada. The waste produced from nuclear power plants is also radioactive. This waste from the plants remains radioactive for approximately 240,000 years, according to Greenpeace International. To put this into perspective, humankind have been on Earth for about 200,000 years. So this is 40,000 more years than humans have been on Earth. The waste must be disposed in a safe manner and to avoid exposing radioactive material to the environment. However, currently, we do not have any safe way to deal with the nuclear waste disposal apart from burying it underground. There is a current proposal to dispose the waste at the Yucca Mountains in Nevada. However, this has been in process since 1982. and it's been pushed to be finished in 2020. Even if this is done, the future of the waste it cannot hold enough waste for the future, basically what it's going to produce in the future. And the U.S. Geological Survey discovered that there was a fault line right under the mountain. So if an earthquake were to happen at the site, there is a possibility that the sealed containers will compromise and leak radiation. So the problem of where to safely dispose all of nuclear waste is still not solved. To conclude, combination of these arguments is enough evidence to state nuclear energy possesses greater disadvantages than advantages. These issues must be addressed before we are able to seriously consider nuclear energy over the safer renewable sources. Thank you.
All right, you ID'd all the claims very clearly. You explained what your counterposition is on each of those points. I thought that as you went through, you signposted things pretty well. The argument not to respond to the safety issues in general on the first point, but just talk about how there is still some risk. That's probably a reasonable challenge to make. I think that you do, in the long run, still suggest that there are issues without getting into the particulars of what the deficiencies in the safety regulations are, and you show that there could be potential problems. The risk of those problems is never quantified, so it's a little bit hard to evaluate, but it's not obviously non-existent. The challenge to whether or not it's the most efficient or able to produce these results, you basically have two arguments here. One is that there's a limit to how much nuclear energy we can use because we have a limit on our supply of uranium, and the second is that alternative energies would be able to produce substantially more in the long run without having the carbon pollution problems that nuclear energy has. If, when you say it's 25 times greater, as I recall, the advocate said that there's basically none. There may be some, so the difference between 0 and 25 times 0 is relatively small. I'm not sure that how you quantify the CO2 coming from a nuclear power plant versus those from wind energy. I think that needs to be a little bit clear. What also needs to be clear is the information that shows that solar energy and wind energy could replace nuclear energy, for instance, or provide as much energy at the same cost to us, for instance. That, I think, is probably the biggest issue. Without any kinds of problems, there's disruption in service or availability. Those seem to be the key issues there, and so maybe a little bit more development on that point. On the waste issue, I thought you did a very good job explaining what the main problem here is, that we don't have a permanent storage system yet, and even if we did have a permanent storage system where they plan on it, there are potential problems with it. I think that is a reasonable challenge. You point out the fact that the advocate accepts that there is a waste challenge that's going on here, and then you basically go right for the one way that has been proposed to deal with the waste issue. So I thought that was a very direct response on that point. All right, thank you.